My name is Jackson Miller. I'm 56 years old, and I used to be a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. These days, I scrub toilets at a military museum in Tampa, Florida. The museum used to honor men like me. Now I wipe their footprints off the tile floors. Most days, I start work before the sun rises, mopping the halls lined with old medals and faded photographs that somehow feel more alive than I do. I live alone in a rusted trailer behind a gas station on Route 301. It leaks when it rains and smells like bleach and dog fur. My only companion is an old shepherd mix named Max, who limps just like I do. I left the service 20 years ago after my third deployment left me with a shattered knee and more than a few things broken in my head. The doctors called it PTSD. I just know it makes sleep a battlefield and crowds feel like ambushes. I used to lead young men into fire. Now I spend my mornings unclogging urinals and scraping gum off the underside of benches in a place filled with the echoes of who I once was. People walk past me like I'm part of the furniture, like I blend in with the background noise of forgotten service. I don't blame them. I don't look like much anymore. Just another worn-out man with bad posture and a name tag that says custodian. I've tried other jobs, but I always came back here. There's something about this place that makes the nightmares quieter. Maybe it's the flags, maybe it's the silence before the tours begin. Maybe it's because this place still remembers something I've spent years trying to forget. I used to think the hardest part of war was the bullets. It's not. It's coming home and realizing no one knows who you are anymore. Your uniform's gone, your purpose is gone, and the world has moved on without you. Sometimes, I stare at the Medal of Honor exhibit. I recognize some of the names. I trained with one of them. Died in Fallujah. Got a statue. I got arthritis. There's a glass case in the back room filled with old letters soldiers wrote home. I clean the smudges off it every week. Sometimes I read the letters. They're filled with hope, promises. Stories meant for wives, children, and people waiting. I used to write those letters too. Now, I spend more time with a mop than I ever did with a rifle. There's something almost sacred about cleaning this place. Like I'm still serving, in some strange, quiet way, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Every sweep of the broom feels like a reminder that I survived something I never quite came back from. I don't talk much to the other staff. Most of them are college kids doing summer jobs. They call me sir sometimes, but they don't know why. I don't tell them. Let them think I'm just the janitor with the limp and the quiet dog who waits outside. Max waits for me every shift, curled up near the parking lot entrance. He doesn't bark, just watches. We've got that in common, watching a world that doesn't see us anymore. Some days are harder than others. Anniversaries, birthdays, the day I left, the day I came back, the day she left. They stack up like medals I'll never wear. I don't hate this life, but it's not the one I was promised. It's not the one I fought for. And if I'm being honest, I stopped expecting much from the world a long time ago. But lately, something's been stirring. Something quiet, like the way you can feel a storm coming before the wind shifts. I don't know what it is yet, but for the first time in years, I think something's about to change. I still remember the smell of jet fuel and old leather on the day I came home. My uniform was too tight across the shoulders, my duffel bag too light. But my heart was full. I thought I was coming back to something that would hold me together. The cab dropped me off in front of our house in Savannah. The grass was taller than I remembered, the porch light dead, the mailbox stuffed. I chalked it up to a busy week or maybe a broken bulb. I knocked twice before using my key. The lock turned easily, but the air inside didn't smell like her anymore. It smelled like dust and time. The furniture was gone. So was the picture of us from Myrtle Beach that used to sit on the hallway table. There was only one thing left on that table. A letter, folded in half, with my name written in her handwriting. I knew it before I touched it. That kind of recognition runs deeper than words. It hits like a punch in the ribs. I sat on the stairs and opened it slowly, like peeling a bandage off something already scarred. The letter was short. It said, "I waited for the hero, Jackson, but only a stranger came back." Life doesn't stop for your pain. I read it twice. Then again. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a sorry, maybe a fight, but it was just that. Cold, final, like a door being shut and locked from the other side. She left with her cousin, Kyle. That part came from a neighbor who poked his head out when he saw me loading my things back into a bag. He said they'd been close while I was overseas. Too close. He didn't ask for details. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I just stood there in the front yard for a while, holding a letter that felt heavier than anything I had ever carried in the desert. Then I turned around and walked back to the bus stop. People expect soldiers to be angry when they get betrayed, but anger takes energy. I didn't have any left. Not after years of sleeping in boots and living off adrenaline and canned hope. What hurt the most wasn't that she left. It was then that I understood why. I wasn't the same man. I couldn't be. I brought home a limp, a tremor in my hands, and silence in my eyes. I brought home shadows. She didn't marry a ghost. But that's what came back to her. I don't blame her for running. Sometimes I wish I could have run too. That night I slept on a bench in the bus terminal, my head against my bag and her letter in my coat pocket. I remember the sound of wheels rolling across tile, the flicker of fluorescent lights. I remember thinking this must be what starting over feels like. I never went back to that house. Never called her, never asked why. I didn't need to. The truth was written in those 2 sentences, more honest than anything she'd said in the 5 years I was gone. I carried that letter with me for a while, not out of spite, but because it reminded me that even home can stop waiting, even love can get tired, and sometimes, the only welcome you get is silence. Eventually, I stopped opening the envelope. I folded it tight and kept it with my discharge papers. Some things you hold on to not because they're precious, but because they remind you what it costs to lose everything. It was the last thing I ever received from her. No calls, no postcards, just that letter. Just that reminder that some battles follow you home, and some you lose without firing a single shot. It was just another Tuesday morning. The janitor's closet smelled like bleach and damp rags, and my back already ached from scrubbing tile. I was finishing up in the main hall bathroom, the one with the shiny marble counters and hand dryers that never worked right, when the door creaked open behind me. I didn't look up at first. Visitors wandered in sometimes, but this time it wasn't the usual shuffle of sneakers or the confused steps of tourists. It was sharp, precise. The kind of footsteps that carried weight without noise. I turned around and saw a man in a dark gray suit, polished shoes cutting across the wet floor like they didn't care who just cleaned it. He looked out of place, like someone walked him off a courtroom set and dropped him into the wrong scene. He didn't flinch at the smell or the stains or the mop in my hand. He just said, "Are you Jackson Miller?" I nodded, blinking from the glare of overhead lights bouncing off his watch. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out a sealed envelope, and held it out like it was something fragile. He said, "This is from Colonel Wyatt. He instructed me to deliver it to you, exactly 5 years after his death." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. That name hadn't been spoken to me in years. Colonel Richard Wyatt, my commanding officer. The man who pulled me out of the wreckage in Kandahar stayed with me in the hospital and later wrote the only recommendation that got me any post-service work. He was the last person who saw the best in me. I took the envelope like it might disappear. I looked down at my own hands, still wet from rinsing the mop, still trembling from old injuries. I muttered something about needing a minute and stepped outside. The Florida heat slapped me in the face. I sat on the stone bench near the parking lot, the one where Max usually waited. He wasn't there yet. I held the envelope tight in my lap. It was thick, heavy, the kind of paper that says, "This matters." The lawyer came out a minute later and sat across from me. Said his name was James Wyatt Jr. No relation, just a name. He told me Colonel Wyatt had prepared the letter years before he passed, but placed strict instructions that it couldn't be delivered until 5 years after. I asked him why. He said it had to do with legal protection. Colonel Wyatt had structured his estate so that after 5 years, any claims or challenges to his will would expire. No one, no ex-spouse, no distant relatives, no corporations could touch what was left for me. It was final, untouchable, intentional. I stared at the envelope again, stunned. Colonel Wyatt didn't just remember me, he protected me, even in death. It wasn't just about money, it was about trust, about dignity, about a bond most people wouldn't understand unless they'd worn the same boots, carried the same silence. I asked the lawyer how he found me. He said it wasn't easy. Said Colonel Wyatt had kept tabs over the years, had private investigators check in, just enough to make sure I was still alive, still on my feet, even if barely. He knew I'd never reach out, knew I was too proud, so he planned for that. It hit me in waves. I was sitting there in a sweat-soaked janitor's shirt, still smelling like bleach, while some lawyer in a $1,000 suit explained how a man who owed me nothing had built a 5-year legal wall around a dying wish just to make sure I got it untouched. I felt my throat tighten, not because of the heat, but because it had been so long since anyone thought that far ahead for me, so long since someone chose me without asking for anything in return. I asked the lawyer if he knew what was in the letter. He said no, just that there were instructions, and that I might want to open it somewhere quiet. I nodded and watched him walk away, his shoes clicking down the pavement like a metronome counting something bigger than time. I didn't open the letter right then. I waited until that night, until Max was curled at my feet and the trailer was still. I ran my fingers along the edge for a long time. There was a seal on the back. It had Wyatt's old division insignia embossed in the wax. The same one we both wore on our uniforms. The same one that was still framed on my wall, cracked glass and all. I hadn't thought of myself as part of anything in years. But holding that envelope, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt seen, and that scared the hell out of me. Because I knew whatever was in that letter was going to change something, maybe not the world, but me. And after 25 years of standing still, that was enough. The envelope opened with a soft tear, and inside was a thick sheet of paper, folded once, yellowed at the edges like it had been waiting too long to be read. The handwriting was his, sharp, deliberate, like every word had weight. I held it a second longer before I began. Jackson, if you're reading this, then 5 years have passed since I left this world. I needed time, not for me, but for you. Time to protect what I'm giving you, and time to understand what I'm about to say. I watched you for years, not as a superior officer, but as something more, something I never dared to admit. I've known since the day you arrived at basic training, the scar on your right shoulder, shaped like a star, just like mine, just like the one your mother used to trace when we were young. I knew then. I knew what your mother had never told me in words. You were my son. I wanted to tell you. God, I wanted to. But I also knew what it would mean for you, for your career, for your name, and for mine. The military doesn't always reward truth the way it should. So I stayed close, the only way I could. I requested to oversee your unit. I fought to keep you out of the worst deployments. I visited you in the hospital not just because it was duty, but because I couldn't bear the thought of losing you without ever saying what you meant to me. I wasn't brave enough to be your father out loud. I carried medals on my chest and cowardice in my heart. I thought maybe, one day, I'd get the chance to fix that. But age stole that chance from me, and by the time I got sick, I realized there was only one way to give you what I couldn't in life. So here it is. My name, my story, and everything I ever had, now yours. Not as an officer to his soldier, but as a father to his son. I sat there, my hands shaking harder than they had in years. The words blurred, not from age, but from the flood rising in my chest. A part of me wanted to scream, to ask why he hadn't told me when it mattered. But deeper than that was something else. Relief. The kind that fills the cracks no one sees. All my life, I'd carried this weight. A hole where a father should have been. A question without an answer. And now, through a piece of paper and a memory of a scar, I had both. Not perfectly, not easily, but enough. He had never left me. Not really. He just stood at a distance, watching like fathers sometimes have to do. And now, through this letter, he was reaching across time, offering me not just his name, but a truth that changed everything. The second page of the letter was different. Less personal, more structured. Like a mission briefing, but one written with the kind of care only a father would give. Colonel Wyatt had set aside everything he owned. Not just pensions and savings, but patents, land, old investments in defense tech that had grown into silent giants. It added up to $320 million. I had to read that number twice before it made sense. He left it all in a trust with one condition. It had to be used to rebuild what war had taken from others like me. He didn't want me to just inherit wealth. He wanted me to carry something forward. He laid it out clearly. A scholarship fund for the children of veterans who never made it home. A PTSD treatment center with free long-term care. A mobile housing program for homeless former service members. And a museum restoration wing, in honor of the ones who fought and faded without applause. He didn't ask me to do it all alone. The trust included an advisory board, legal help, and funding blueprints. But he named me as the founder, the face, the one who would tell the story. Not because I was perfect, but because I had lived through what too many couldn't explain. As I read, something inside me started to shift. For years, I had walked in silence. I had felt useless, unseen, angry at a world that cheered for soldiers and forgot their names the moment they stopped marching. But here, in these words, was proof that someone had seen me the whole time, had believed I could still serve, just in a different way. This wasn't about redemption. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about purpose, about healing something bigger than my own wounds, about taking the hurt I carried and turning it into shelter, into scholarships, into second chances. For the first time in decades, I felt like I mattered. Not because of what I lost, but because of what I was now called to build. He gave me more than money. He gave me a mission, one I didn't have to salute to understand. I folded the letter slowly and placed it back in its envelope like it were something sacred. Because it was. Not a goodbye. A beginning. A second life, built not on rank or medals, but on meaning. And for the first time in years, I looked at my reflection in the window of that rusted trailer and didn't see a janitor. I saw a man on a mission. I didn't call her. Didn't write. I didn't need to. I just logged into the bank's transfer system, typed in the old account number I still remembered by heart, and sent $1. In the notes section, I wrote 6 words. So you know, I know. That was it. No drama, no explanation. Just a quiet tap on the shoulder of the past. That dollar wasn't about money. It was about weight, about closure. It was the last thread between us, trimmed with the precision of someone who had already buried the grief. She would know exactly what it meant. She would see that I'd read her letter, lived through the consequences, and still found a way to walk forward. Not bitter, not broken, just aware. She had chosen her path, and I had walked mine. Hers had led to borrowed comfort and fading promises. Mine led through darkness and silence and scrubbing toilets until I found a letter that changed everything. I didn't need revenge. I didn't want pity. I just wanted her to feel the finality. To understand that the man she left behind was not the same man now signing off with a single dollar and a full sense of who he was. That dollar said, I remember, I forgive, but I don't forget. It said, I don't need anything from you, not answers, not apologies. I found peace on my own terms. I never checked to see if she responded. I never looked back. That moment, that message, was all the closure I needed. Quiet, clean, done. Sometimes dignity doesn't look like grand gestures. Sometimes it looks like a transaction that costs $1 and buys back every ounce of your worth. The sun was just starting to rise when I stepped through the museum doors again. Same marble floors, same glass cases. But something was different this time. I wasn't holding a mop, I was wearing a suit. The staff looked at me with that mix of curiosity and quiet respect. Some of them recognized me. Others only knew the name that had been added to the donor wall overnight, Jackson Miller Veterans Fund, etched in bronze. Right beside the Medal of Honor exhibit, I used to clean every Monday morning. I walked the halls slowly, not out of pain, but on purpose, letting my eyes settle on every shadow I used to sweep, every smudge I used to wipe away. This place had once seen me invisible. Now, it saw me fully. Near the entrance, a new wing was opening. PTSD research, veteran outreach, and scholarships for fallen families. My name was on the pamphlets. My story was in the welcome video, but none of that mattered as much as the plaque near the front desk. It was small, clean, centered on the wall I used to lean against during breaks. It read, "In honor of those who served quietly and lived loudly, donated by Jackson Miller." I reached out and touched it. My fingers brushed the cold metal. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. The weight that used to sit in my chest had been replaced by something lighter. Purpose. And then I said it, not loud, not for anyone else, just for me. "You didn't break me. You made me." The words didn't sound bitter. They weren't meant for the past. They were meant for the journey. For every night I slept with a ghost in my head. For every floor I scrubbed, wondering if anyone still remembered my name. This wasn't revenge. It was a rebirth. This place hadn't defeated me. It had refined me, ground me down to the truth, and handed me back to myself. As I turned to leave, Max waited by the door, tail wagging like he understood everything. Maybe he did. Dogs know things we don't say. I walked out into the morning light, the warmth rising on my face. Not a janitor, not a soldier. Just a man who took his broken pieces and built something that would outlive him. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was coming back to something. I felt like I was finally home,